Tena koto katoa, ko Du Bois toku ingwa, no America me Trinidad okutipuna, kete noho auki Virginia, America, na mihi nui kia koto, tena koto, tena koto, tena tato katoa. Kia ora, hello everyone. My name is Du Bois Jennings. I'm Director of Engagement in North America for Education New Zealand, and I'm here with a colleague of mine.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko ahu mairangi te maunga, ko whanganui atara te moana, ko Ngāti Pākehā me Ngāti Hamo ngā iwi, ko Lewis Gibson aho, ngā mihi nui kia koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Kia ora everyone, my name's Lewis. I'm the Field Director for North America based out of Washington, DC with Du Bois. So today we're going to give you a quick overview of North America and the different ways that we are working in the States and North America more generally, and how you can all work with us. So we'll go through a really quick social and political climate update before delving deep into international education in North America, what we are doing there, how you can work with us, and looking towards the future. So without further ado, as you can see from this screen, the US is an extremely fractured society right now. So looking at the top left-hand side of the screen there, these are images taken from the Roe v. Wade leak protests. The big one in the middle is Don't Say Gay Bill protests. The top right-hand corner is critical race theory protests. In the middle corner on the left, we have Black Lives Matter protests from the summer of 2020. On the far right, we have Capitol insurrection on January 6th. And the bottom left, we have COVID protests. So this is just to give you a little bit of a snapshot of how deeply divided the US is politically and socially right now. There are conflicting sentiments. Some people here are trying to escape, others want to stay and fight. There's misinformation on all sides and threats to democracy, and for the first time we saw a Supreme Court amendment that restricts civil rights. Amidst a rise in white nationalist terrorism, the US is also grappling with rising inflation, the Great Resignation, the changing world of work, changing cities and communities with the rise of remote work, increased climate-induced natural disasters, Putin sympathizers and COVID deniers, and a potential upcoming recession. But throughout all of this, there remains opportunities for connection and collaboration with New Zealand. So the Biden administration is very clear in their ambitions and in trying to be a beacon of hope, as they call it. They embrace diversity and inclusion, and they want to reaffirm civil rights. The administration's rhetoric is largely around trying to be inclusive, to be tolerant, and to bring people together. But they're also clear in that they stand against Trumpism and the other forces seeking to divide America. So against this backdrop, the Department of Education has released an updated international education strategy called Succeeding Globally Through International Education and Engagement. It largely looks to strengthen education and build tolerant citizens. The strategy identified the need to prepare students to engage with the world, to develop global and culturally competent citizens, to develop critical thinking skills outside of reading, writing, mathematics, and science, to develop communication skills, including languages, and to develop advanced mathematics, science, and technical skills. The report also identifies that this is needed as the US is a multicultural, diverse society, and its citizens need to be able to communicate across different cultural traditions and perspectives. Therefore, interpersonal skills and appreciation for diverse viewpoints for civil discourse and cohesion are a must. There are global challenges and opportunities identified, including within public health, climate change, natural disasters, and international trade. And the US needs its citizens to be able to work and communicate across borders. It also identifies global competitiveness. Students are competing with global talent, and the US needs the capacity to understand and interact with the world, including students that have language skills and appreciation for other cultures and countries. There's also a big focus on national security and diplomacy. The US needs its citizens to understand US history and policies through civic and global awareness. This is essential for international affairs, national defense, intelligence, homeland security, and law enforcement. So you can see there's two strategic goals. One is to strengthen US education, and the other one is to advance the US's international priorities. And these are underpinned by three objectives. Number one is to increase students' global and cultural competencies with explicit references to proficiency in 2 languages and learning culture through the arts. Number two is to learn from and with other countries. And number three is to engage in education diplomacy. So the US Department of Education worked with other agencies right across the federal government, including the US Departments of State, Commerce, Homeland Security, and the US Agency for International Development. And they've identified that this collaborative approach is needed because the past 2 decades have shown how vital people-to-people relationships around the world are. And some of the threats that they've mentioned are the 9/11, the recession, cybersecurity threats, the migration crisis, climate change, and the COVID-19 pandemic. Last year in 2021, the US Departments of Education and State reaffirmed the US commitment to international education, the first public affirmation in over 20 years emphasizing the importance of international education in improving American lives and promoting US global leadership. They committed to undertake actions to support a renewed focus on international education, covering 10 key principles, which includes the likes of internationalization, encouraging teachers, researchers, and scholars who reflect the diversity of the US to study overseas, and to promote expanded access to international education using technology as some of their principles. So there are key opportunities for New Zealand to align with US federal priorities, explicitly in STEM, but also in culture and the arts as well. And we're going to go through a little bit right now to show you some of the ways and opportunities there are to collaborate with the US at the institutional and the governmental level. So I'll pass it back to you, Du Bois.
Kia ora, Lewis. Thanks for that snapshot of what's going on here in the States. And this context is important to understand because it helps inform the narrative we promote about New Zealand and New Zealand education when we engage with international education in the field here. So I'd like to begin the next portion of this presentation by sharing kind of what the vibe is in the US international ed landscape at the moment. In terms of tertiary study abroad, there's a lot of anticipation for the US spring semester starting in January. Study abroad offices are expecting the number of students studying abroad to return to pre-COVID numbers or even higher. And we're getting anecdotal stories and contact from our colleagues just saying that interest in New Zealand is still very strong and has been throughout the pandemic. Students were asking what was the border situation and when they'd be able to go. So, however, there's a lot of uncertainty around the number of students who will actually be able to go. Right now, universities are facing under-resourced international office. COVID-19 saw international offices losing a lot of staff, and then the Great Resignation after that increased that. So there's a lot of vacant positions and new entry-level staff, maybe new to international education or advising. High flight costs are also expected to be a deterrent as many families are struggling financially due to COVID and the potential coming recession here. And there aren't any New Zealand study abroad alumni on college campuses to promote the country through word of mouth. International offices and even us at ENZ really depend on, students to share their experience in New Zealand to kind of spread the word. But since the borders have been closed for 2 years, all of those students have graduated. And finally, we're a bit late. The announcement was a little late as many institutions have instituted a year advanced application cycle. So meaning US spring semester study abroad students have on many campuses have already confirmed their destination of study last year. So in addition to these challenges, we're also getting a lot of reports of increased necessity of student support services while students are abroad. Traditionally, the advising role in international offices would see the advisor working with the student before they left and then kind of sending them off and working with the next group of advisees. But due to quarantine and COVID rules or immigration and visa challenges, and especially due to increased mental health issues, we're getting more and more reports that these study abroad office staff are really overwhelmed with student support at the moment. And then finally, justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, or JEDI, I'll be talking about it throughout this presentation, is the dominating topic of discourse in the field right now in North America and its relationship to international education. And that's where we see New Zealand and New Zealand international education really having a good way to add value and promote ourselves. And the last two issues I mentioned, increased mental health support and justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, are not issues exclusive to tertiary education. Schools, kindergarten, or through 12th grade in the States, are facing similar challenges to the school systems in New Zealand. Principals and teachers are grappling with the new roles they have to play in school due to COVID. There's increased attention being paid to crisis management, social and emotional learning, familial and community support, as well as what role the school should be playing when it comes to healthcare and mental health. And there is increased attention being paid to serving students and families from marginalized backgrounds, and creating curriculum that is inclusive to students from these backgrounds and communities. So given these challenges and the context in which we're working, we've developed an approach to the region with 3 distinct foci. And the first part of the strategy is reciprocal relationship building. Because resources are so limited, it's just Lewis and I, we've had to aim higher and try to work with organizations or positions who have their hands on the levers of greater student flow. And our aim is to develop long-term, sustainable, and reciprocal partnerships with these groups. We still maintain great relationships with individual institutions and individual international office. They've expressed to us their appreciation with our communication through the listserv, and we're still frequently the first point of contact for US institutions or schools that want to engage with New Zealand institutions or schools or set up relationships, and we're happy to still play that point. However, we won't be doing one-off fairs anymore, and we're a little less student focused or promoting directly to students. Instead, we're focusing more of our efforts on cultivating relationships with organizations, consortia, and groups of institutions and professional networks. For example, we're working with the National Science Foundation, or the NSF. The NSF is an $8 billion US government-funded organization focused on STEM research. In this partnership, we're seeking to develop a couple of co-funded exchanges between minority-serving institutions and New Zealand institutions. We also have our partnership with the US State Department's Bureau of Education and Cultural Affairs, or the ECA. New Zealand was the first country to sign an agreement with the ECA around their Gilman Scholarship. This is a scholarship program that awards students from low socioeconomic backgrounds funds specifically for a study abroad experience. We're also working with the ECA to pilot a grant program specifically designed for Indigenous institutions to develop study abroad capabilities in an effort to eventually set up exchanges with New Zealand. And our engagement with professional organizations allow us to have a wider footprint of influence. We're presenting at conferences and partnering with international education professional organizations like the Forum, NAFSA, AIEA, and Diversity Abroad. Lewis is on the planning committee for the Diversity Abroad, and we've established relationships with the president of the National Association of College Admission Counseling, or NACAC, who is very interested in our approach to JEDI and international full degree student recruitment. And speaking of NACAC, that organization, this relates directly to our second strategic objective in the full degree space. This is a strategy that's all around increasing the number of full degree US students studying at New Zealand institutions. And we're working on this in a few ways. One, we're trying to build our counselor and high school consultant networks by participating in their professional organizations. We're also growing our engagement with community colleges in the US. We're identifying community college systems across the country that are building their international education programming and offering New Zealand as an early partner. Lewis has been engaged with the professional organization CCID, and we have a North America Advisory Board assisting us with our outreach efforts. We also plan to target school districts that have already sent US students and develop relationships with them. And finally, we're continuing to discuss the possibility of New Zealand institutions going test optional. For a number of reasons, many US institutions are opting to make the traditional standardized tests for college admissions optional, and we feel New Zealand could stand out as being one of the first countries to follow suit by removing standardized test requirements. And for our third strategic objective in the US, I've talked about it throughout the presentation, but it's meaningful participation and representation at various events, conferences, and slowly getting into the media space. For example, at NASA this year, interviews with our Minister of Education were featured in major higher ed and international education publications. And our very own Lewis here has written a couple of articles for the Institute of International Education's quarterly publication. We're also maintaining meaningful presence through exhibiting and presenting at the major international education conferences and continuing to offer our well-attended virtual events like the Korerorero series, Conversations That Matter. And while most of the things I mentioned up until now focus on higher education, we're also remaining active in the school space as well. Our goal here is to begin to promote New Zealand as a country advanced in its approach to social and emotional learning. We're doing this through the promotion of key New Zealand educators who are making a big splash in the US. We've developed close relationship with the likes of Hamish Brewer and Joanne McKeechin, and are currently assisting them with promotional efforts in the US. We're also attempting to connect US and New Zealand schools. Our most fruitful conversations have been with the Washington, D.C. public school system. They already have student mobility programs, and we've talked to at least one teacher who is very interested in bringing his class to New Zealand and hosting New Zealand students in the US. DC public schools are also eager to develop partnerships with New Zealand schools virtually. We have a couple of schools in the DC area that began partnerships with New Zealand schools, but eventually lost touch due to COVID. But even though they lost touch, the educators reported that they found the experience flexible engagement curriculum for these kinds of exchanges. And if you are in the school sector and this kind of engagement with the US school sounds like something your school would be interested in, please don't hesitate to contact Lewis and I so we can begin to make introductions. I just want to reiterate that most, if not all of these initiatives are being developed through the lens of justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, or JEDI. Given the cultural context in North America that Lewis talked about, and New Zealand's unique bicultural heritage and relative progress made in education as it relates to access and inclusion, we feel this is where New Zealand can add the most value and build its reputation in international ed. We're beginning to stand out. We've gained a lot of attention because we're constantly trying to include the Indigenous perspective into international education, something that's often overlooked here, even in JEDI conversations in the field. It's driving most of our conversations, and we're being invited to participate and even pioneer high-level initiatives with strategic partners, simultaneously raising the profile of New Zealand and getting more student interest in the country. Honoring Te Tiriti o Waitangi not only is our obligation, but it allows us to offer a unique model for international education that US institutions, organizations, and government partners look to when thinking about the future of comprehensive internationalization and engagement with other countries. When I present on Te Tiriti o Waitangi, the letter of expectations from our minister, and the internationalization framework that we're developing here at Education New Zealand, it demonstrates how New Zealand can and will stand out. I often hear comments about New Zealand is leading the way, or we should be more like New Zealand in our approach to internationalization. So I can't overemphasize how important it will be to do this right, follow through, and really walk the walk. Because New Zealand education has the potential to be the model for morally and socially responsible international education, which is the dominating topic of debate in the field at the moment. So I just wanted to end by looking ahead a little bit at what we have coming up. As I mentioned, we established a North American advisory board last year. We got over 100 applicants from people of all levels of international ed. Lewis and I and other teammates at ENZ painstakingly narrowed it down to 10 individuals. We actually got the chance to meet them all in person in April, where we did a two-day workshop on how they could help us with the initiatives that I mentioned above. We're now in the process of integrating their project ideas and network contacts into our regional strategy for the coming academic years. In higher ed, our biggest event coming up will be the New Zealand Study Abroad Month. This idea is to promote New Zealand as a study abroad destination, open and ready for business in the US spring of 2023, having it be simultaneously student and study abroad professional focus with easy to digest and accessible video format. We hope it will address some of the challenges we face on US campuses that I mentioned earlier. And for schools, we're keen to create a curriculum for US schools to learn about New Zealand. The embassy gets contacted by school districts with requests for resources on New Zealand. Instead of just sending a flag and a stuffed kiwi, it would be great if ENZ was able to create a ready-made curriculum scalable for different grades with interactive activities that would get students interested in New Zealand from a young age, hopefully prompting them to study abroad or even seek out a full degree in New Zealand when they're of age. So that's kind of a snapshot of what's happening in North America. We really look forward to the upcoming discussion and getting questions from you. Ngā mihi.
Thank you, everyone. See you soon.